Thank you, Jim, and thanks for everything you do in getting these events organized. It's not often, you have a chance to be among so many other fellow conservatives, especially as things go, except in Orange County, I suppose, but as things go a little bit more to the left in this state, it is so great to have a chance to be among so many fellow conservatives and fellow like-minded people. My name is Mike Schroeder. I'm former chairman of the California Republican Party. And what we're going to talk about today is ideas and thoughts as to how we can get back to winning statewide elections in California. And the format's going to be pretty informal. We're going to start with some brief opening statements, and then we're going to pick a series of topics that I'm going to kind of fire out, and then we're going to respond to them. And I'll start off by indicating that throughout my political life in California, I've never really believed that California was as red as it appeared to be when it was red. We had 16 years of straight Republican governors, or as blue as it sometimes appears as well. My opinion is that California is fairly centrist in its orientation, always has been. They tend to look at who they think is the most extreme candidate and vote for the other person. I mean, you can make the case that if you looked at some of Pete Wilson's ads and some of Gray Davis's ads, if you didn't know who they were touting, you really couldn't have told the difference. But I think that is something that means that there's more opportunity for us than some people might think. Politics, in my view, is not particularly complex. You don't need to be a particular political genius to understand it. In my opinion, it is strictly a function of getting down to the basic blocking and tackling of politics. If you want to win elections, you need good candidates, and you need to develop those candidates. In other words, you need to have a bench, which is something that we need to address in this state, and I think we'll talk about doing that. And you need to have the organizational work behind them. And finally, and most importantly, you need to articulate a message that people care enough about. I mean, Dana Rohrabacher often says, look, if you don't have a message that's going to make a practical difference for most working people in this state, then you don't deserve to be elected. I think he's absolutely right. So, Ron, would you like to give some thoughts?
Well, thanks very much, Mike, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to participate today. I wanted to focus my comments really in opening on two areas, and I hope that we can go into greater detail on both of them. One is the need for a stronger party organization in California, and the other is the need to improve our candidate performance among people who don't look like me. And that is, we're doing very, very well among good-looking 41-year-old, white blonde guys from San Diego. That demographic has been locked down. It's other demographics where we need to do better without compromising on the principles that bring us to the Republican Party in the first place. And secondly, there's a need for a stronger party organization, and that is that a strong party organization is not going to turn an 11-point loss like last year's governor's race into a 5-point win, but it could turn a 1-point loss into a 1-point win. And if you consider last year's Attorney General's race and how close that wound up being, if we had stronger party organization throughout the state of California, particularly in high population centers along the coast, we would have a Republican Attorney General today named Steve Cooley instead of having Kamala Harris, whose politics is somewhere to the left of Pyongyang's politics. And so it does make a difference there. So I hope we have the opportunity to go into those two areas a little bit deeper today.
Ron had just finished serving us for 4 years as the chairman of the California Republican Party, which shows an incredible amount of devotion because it's full-time unpaid for 4 years. I was only crazy enough to do it for 2. But the final person you're going to hear from in opening statements is the only person that ever did it 2 terms non-consecutively. He served, and then he was basically dragged out of retirement, almost like the line out of the Godfather, where he goes, just when I thought we was out, you dragged me back in. And that's Terso. He was dragged back in to do a second term where I was privileged to serve as his treasurer. Terso?
First of all, it's a great pleasure to be with you. I am actually retired, not only from medicine, but also politics. To me, it's very interesting, the fact that I consider the situation today no different than what it was when Ronald Reagan got elected governor. I participated in that election very strongly. In fact, I was chairman of the Goldwater Hispanic campaign. And it's no different when George Tuckmayan was elected governor, and it was no different than when Pete Wilson was elected governor. In each and every one of those, our party was a minority party in this state, probably more or less like we are today. In those days was an uphill battle. But we did certain things that, by the way, I repeated again when Pete Wilson ran for governor. And perhaps on the side, I should tell you that when we took over the party, Mike and I and so on, Pete Wilson was down 24 points to Kathleen Brown. I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that those three campaigns, the party played a very, very major role. So much that I have letters that I should have brought with me from President Ronald Reagan and Governor George Tuckmayan, specifically acknowledging that they owe their status in politics to the state party. We, in 1951, created or developed the first absentee ballot that elected, in effect, George Tuckmayan. Perhaps I should relate to you that, I don't know if you remember, that Mayor Bradley was given as the next governor of the state of California until 4 o'clock in the morning when the media acknowledged the fact that the California Republican Party, for the first time in the history of this country, had issued an absentee ballot that had collected 150,000 votes. And by the way, we did not outsource this. We did it ourselves, starting from the delivery of each one of those ballots. All the telephone operation was conducted by the state party. In fact, I remember early September getting a telephone call from Bill Roberts, then campaign chairman for George Tuckmayan, in effect asking me not to do an absentee ballot, but to give him the $400,000 that we had appropriated for that purpose, and that he would give, quote unquote, I'll give you a Republican governor come November the 3rd. So I said, Bill, which I do very well because I worked with him during the early campaign of then Governor Reagan. And I said, Bill, I can't do that. I've committed to this. It's been a very conflicting decision, but I've made the decision. And later on, the governor acknowledged that that decision was, in effect, what put him over. I want to remind you that George Tuckmayan won the governorship of this state after 12 million votes have been casted by 75,000 votes.
It wasn't clear for a number of weeks, was it?
Well, no, it was clear at the end, but of course they challenged the election and so on. But it was a very close election. When Pete Wilson, we did the same thing. I personally believe that the state Republican Party plays a very major role in the future of this party. Whatever the Republican county chairmen, whatever the volunteer organization, be the Federal Republicans, the United Republicans, the CRA, Young Republicans, so on, do, depends on the leadership of the party. I think that we got to return to the basics. We have to run this party as a business. We got to recognize that the leaders of this party is our elected officials, and bring them into the party and make him part of the party, as well as the business community. By that I mean that they have a voice. Very early after my election to chairmanship of the party, within 30 days we had a plan in place, we had a budget in place, but every single program that we had, the governor, the president of the United States, which in those days was represented by Len Nafziger, will sign off. And they had a very important role. The Bill Campbell and Bob Naylor from the Assembly were part of our organization. We had the same problems that we have today. The party was divided. And I said to the Assembly Senator, I will have a $1 million dinner, and I would allocate it for the candidates. And we did that. On election, after the primary, we gave George Deukmejian $500,000 and distributed extra money. We had them participate, and we had a united program, and I believe that that kind of commitment from the business community, from the volunteer organizations, from the county organizations, united, in my opinion, we can restore the viability of the Republic in the state and regain the position that we had before.
Thanks, Terso. All right, let's take us right to our first topic. The first topic that I think a number of us have raised is how do we as conservatives, how do we appeal to Hispanics and Asians? And I'll start the conversation off by saying, you know, when I was chairman, we did quite a bit of research. The idea was if you're going to treat things like a business, well, who would be someone who would be an expert at understanding the Hispanic vote? Well, it would be someone who worked in the commercial realm. And the guy that we hired was a guy named Lionel Sosa. And Lionel Sosa was the consultant for George Bush when he won as governor of Texas. And he won the Hispanic vote. We wanted to know how he did that. And what Sosa did is he was the person who did all the market research for Pepsi and Coke and Ford and GM and companies like that as to how to market. And so we brought him out here. I spent about $300,000 doing focus groups and polling. And what was really interesting that came out of it is I sat on every one of the focus groups. And we'd go around, and the first question would be, what's the most important thing to you? And we give them a list of topics. And when we hit family, like if there's 12 people in the room, that would be 11 of them would go up as the number one, number one and most important thing. And number two would be education. We found that most of the people in the focus groups were socially conservative. The fastest growing source of new small businesses in California are Latino-owned businesses. So talking about small businesses. And respect. I mean, that was basically it. And the ads that that Bush had used in Texas originally came out, and they had two Hispanic women talking about how, you know, because family was important. She and her husband got married when they were 18 or 19, but you know, their son, you know, Jaime's going to wait until college is completed before he does that, and he's already going to start making as much as her husband does, and isn't that great? And at the end, there was a little tagline that was George Bush just saying, you know, family and education is important. It showed respect. It was understated. It did very well. As a part of that, we formed Republican National Hispanic Association chapters, RNHA chapters around the state. And out of that, the original presidents of those, 5 of them ended up in the legislature. Not all of them, to be honest, totally conservative. In fact, one of them, I have to confess, was Abel Maldonado. But so I have to own that one. But I know I bring it up in Histons. I just gave some money to his opponent in the primary this time around. But we, you know, we got Rod Pacheco, Bob Pacheco. We got a number of. We ended up with 5 people in the legislature out of that. And the thing that I believe about this is if you want to do well in a community, you need an icon leader that looks like the community. We've done very well in Orange County in the Vietnamese community because we have people like Van Tran, and we have people like Janet Nguyen and Tyler Dieppe and people like that. They can be our leaders there. And if we really want to do well in the Hispanic communities, in my opinion, we're going to need leaders that can articulate our issues, because we're not going to win on the immigration issue, but we have a lot of other issues to talk about. And if we have leaders in our party that articulate our views, I think that's probably our best option. Ron?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I wanted to compliment and add to some of the things that Mike just said. First is we have to recognize that if you take a look at Central American countries, or if you take a look at those countries which are the countries of origin for our Latino community here, most Latinos in the United States come from countries which have elected center-right leaders, not center-left leaders. Of the top 10 countries, which are the countries of origin for our Latino community, 4 of those countries, including Mexico, have center-right leaders, and 6 have center-left leaders. But so that the Latino community is not pre-programmed to vote for liberals and not pre-programmed to vote left. As a matter of fact, on many issues, they tend to side with us. The issue of immigration, however, has become much more important to this community than just taxes or regulation or litigation reform or education or health care. Immigration has become an issue which defines both parties for many people in these communities. It's important to recognize that. And what I find in terms of many of our candidates is a few things. First is that when you're having an argument, if you just repeat the same argument louder, it's very unlikely that you're going to wind up winning the argument as a result. And for years, we have been telling ourselves, well, this community is socially conservative. We should just talk to them about social conservative issues and we'll win. And we do that all the time, and we don't. It's for the same reason that we keep telling ourselves, well, the Jewish community should be voting for Republicans because we're stronger on Israel. So if we just repeat how much we're in favor of Israel as opposed to the Democrats, we'll win. Well, we've been doing that for 20 years, and that hasn't been working either. So we need to fundamentally re-examine why is it that this is not working. And there are a few reasons. Number one is our candidates, by and large, do not have an understanding of what is happening in the countries of origin of our Latino community. You ask your typical Republican candidate about what's happening in Mexico or in Guatemala or Honduras or in El Salvador, and they don't know. You ask the same Democrat, chances are they'll have a greater level of knowledge because they come from that community, and they'll have an understanding of that. 25%, according to one statistic I've seen, 25% of the economy in Guatemala runs off of remittances from Guatemalans in America back to Guatemala. 25% of the economy of that country runs on remittances back from here. Second, our candidates can't speak Spanish. And you're more likely to be running against a Democrat who can speak Spanish. So this becomes complicated because many of our Republican elected officials don't have to win in the Latino community in order to win their office. Because the Voting Rights Act has the unintended effect of taking Latinos out of Republican districts and concentrating them in heavily Democratic districts. And so Republicans don't have to learn how to do better in the Latino community in order to win their office. The problem comes along when you have a statewide election and you can't gerrymander states, right? That's one thing. You can't gerrymander Senate seats, you can't gerrymander governorships. Then we have a campaign for governor, and we have a lack of relationships into those communities, and we have a lack of Republican elected officials elected from those communities. This is a further challenge to our team. Finally, we don't communicate with Latino news media nearly enough. When we won Shirley Horton's assembly seat in 2002, in one of the most racially and ethnically diverse assembly districts in the country, one of the reasons why Shirley Horton was successful is that in such a diverse district, they would literally go to a street corner in a populated part of the district and say, okay, the people in this area, what newspaper do they read? What cable channels are they watching? Who are the opinion leaders in this community? And let's target them. Let's build relationships with those folks in a bottom-up campaign. And it was very successful. Shirley Horton won the endorsement of one Democrat after another from these various communities because she sought to build relationships, and her opponent, Vince Hall, had taken that vote for granted. And those are a couple of the things which our candidates can do better. But that does not happen unless we make a concerted effort to do so. And so far I haven't seen that, but this is imperative. This is not a question of politics. It's a question of mathematics. We cannot become a majority party in California without substantially raising our performance in the Latino community.
Terso?
Let me see if I can articulate clearly what we did both times when I was chairman in the 80s and the 90s. First of all, I think it's very important to recognize that we got to target the Hispanic community based on issues. First of all, we must recognize that the Hispanic community is composed of three major groups. Hispanics born in the United States, which are American citizens. Hispanics who are citizens by choice. And third, the illegal immigrants. So just to you, of those three groups, the smallest is the first one, and the largest is the third one. If you go to any of these demonstrations that are out there, the majority of the people in there, I'd say 70 to 80%, are illegal immigrants. When we run surveys, it is important that we're able to target and identify those who are voting Mexican Americans. And we got to be just like we do with and run this just like we run the Anglo-directed campaigns. I did the same thing when I became national chairman of the Hispanic Assembly, and we did the same thing all over the country. And Ronald Reagan got like 45% of the Hispanic vote at that time. The first time I was the chairman of the party, I wanted to know exactly where this group that we identified as voting members of the Hispanic community stood. There was, at that time, the major issue was gun control, the issue that we had with Rosebird in the Supreme Court of the state of California, the issue of the right to life, the issue of school choice, and the first time the issue of immigration was not a prevalent issue. We ran a survey according to first identifying those who were voters. And we found out that in spite of the fact that the leadership of the Hispanic community in Sacramento, Assembly and Senator, both of them were against gun control. They were pro-abortion, against the right to life. They were against the school choice. We found out that those were issues that we would have to target. And we did exactly that. And we found that we had a serious problem with the media. It doesn't matter how much money you spend with Channel 34, Channel 52, or the Hispanic press. This is totally controlled by the left-wing Hispanics. Moreover, we must realize that the audience of Channel 34 and the audience of the Hispanic media is the illegal immigrants. That's a fact, and you got to realize that. So that has to be handled in a totally different way than the way you would handle the American press. We had a great communication director at that time, and we channeled this thing. Our campaign, the first time and the second, was all targeted. I mean, I don't mind telling you that I was the author of in the initiative 187, we got 66% of the American vote, and we got 40% of the voting Hispanic people. That doesn't mean that 40% of the Hispanic community agrees with 187, but of the voting group, which is, by the way, the ones I think it should be considered. And when we first started trying to qualify 187, which, by the way, no Republican candidate helped us except Senator Montoy.
And to be clear, but Prop 187 it was something that banned all government. I'm sorry. Prop 187 banned all government benefits for people that were illegal aliens.
Thank you. The point that I want to make is that issue remains very popular and very important in the state of California. And we got to face up to the fact that the illegal immigrants represent the majority of the, I mean, let's face it, there are, what, 5 to 6 million Hispanics in this state? And better than 3 to 4 million are illegal immigrants. So, however, they, in my opinion, are the voting bloc that we must be addressed. I think it's wrong to look at the Hispanic in a generic way and all the same. No more that when we go and run a campaign among the average American, we identify the independents, we identify the conservative Republicans, the Republicans, we identify the conservative Democrats, and we direct our mailers, and we direct our campaign towards those people. I suggest to you that the first step that we have to do is to identify who and target those people who are receptive to our position. And we should not hide our position. We have a platform that speaks loudly about the right to life, about gun control, small government, school choice, and we should put it out there on the table. And I suggest that if you run surveys, which are very difficult to conduct, you will find that we don't have a majority, but we have like 40% or 35%, and that's all we need. We don't need to have a majority among Hispanics, but we need to have 35 to 40% of the vote. All I can say is that was my philosophy the first time around. It was my philosophy the second time around, and it worked. And I think when it comes to Hispanic vote, we must not talk about Hispanic in a generic way. We are not all the same. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Can everyone hear us all right? You know, I used to ask that question differently. I used to ask, is there anyone who can't hear me? But one time I did that and someone raised their hand and everybody moved over that way. So I don't do that anymore.
If you don't mind me mentioning, we are taping this for the internet, and so it's real important that everybody speak into the mic. Otherwise, not only the audience here might not hear, but we won't be able to get the sound quality for the...
All right. Well, let us know if we are transgressing in that area. We're now going to go to the Jeopardy lightning rounds. I'm going to raise a couple of topics, and then we're each going to go 2 minutes on those topics. And the first one is going to be the Tea Party movement. Specifically, it was like a giant wave that started out on the East Coast. It came all the way across, but in fairness, it kind of crashed on the Rockies. And the Tea Party movement, much as I'm a part of it, much as I believe in it, really didn't have much of an effect in California. So the question that I want to put out to the three of us, and I'll start, is why? My opinion is very simple, which is that if you look at the Tea Party movement, the #1 driving force behind the Tea Party movement is taxes and spending. You know, I'm a social conservative. I care about those issues, but that really wasn't what drove them. And if you looked at the candidates that we had out here the last time, they really didn't run on those issues. We had Meg Whitman, who moved off of the no taxes pledge a week after she got the nomination. And then you had Abel Maldonado, and you had Valines, who respectively in the Assembly and State Senate cast the deciding vote for the largest tax increase in California history. Really hard to get any of us tax folks motivated. So I believe, though, that in many of these elections that we're looking at, you know, 3, 4, 5 points can make a huge difference. We didn't offer anything that mattered and was relevant to the people in the Tea Party movement, and so where they were a driving force in some other places, they weren't here. Ron?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. First is that the notion that Republicans just cleaned up everywhere except in California simply is not true. If you look at the 6 most Democratic states in the country, states like Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois, Hawaii, New York, and the top 6, Maryland, we won. There were 26 statewide elections in those 6 states. The Democrats won 25 of 26 statewide elections in the most Democratic states in the country. Ironically, the one race which we won was for Barack Obama's Senate seat in Illinois. So there is you know, a blessing in there. But in terms of our party connecting with the Tea Party movement, I think there's also the fact that our districts are so hermetically gerrymandered that we lost no seats in the horrible election year of 2008 in California. In the horrible election year of 2006, we only lost 1, and we gained 0 in 2010. So the fact that our districts have been so isolated from the overarching political trends, I think contributes to that. I think Mike's point is valid in that people are brought to the party very often because of issues and their commitment to those issues. And while we persuade through reason, we motivate through emotion. And I think when our candidates go over the top in trying to distance themselves from the core of our party, in an attempt to go after independent voters, first, I don't think they're more likely to get the independent voters. And what they lose is tens of thousands of precinct walkers and tens of thousands of volunteers and enthusiasts, people who get excited because of issues, because they see a candidate who's consciously distancing themselves from that. You don't make friends of your enemies by making enemies of your friends in politics.
Perfect. 2 minutes exactly. I wish I knew how to do that. Terso, go.
I believe that our candidates have to unite. We cannot have a congressman going one way, a person running for statewide races going another way, and another individual running for lieutenant governor. One of the most important functions of the party is to early in the game, as we select our candidates, bring them together philosophically, and it can be done. And the only group that can do this is the state party, in my opinion. But very early, you got to bring the leadership of the Assembly, the Senate, and the Congress into the party. These people, once you do that, they can reach out to the Tea Party movement. The fact is, like Mike says, the visibility of the Tea Party was not too great in this state. I, for one, I'm a member, but nobody contacted me. I made a substantial contribution on my own, and so are the other leaders in the state. There is no reason why the Tea Party was not stronger than it was in this state, because they represent the Republican Party ideology, socially and economically, and they're part of us. Why can we be part of them? I personally think, again, that it is important to bring all these elements and be part of the party. I want to finish this telling you that when I was chairman, I never sent out not even a press release without having the White House, led by Liv Natsiger's political director, clear the message. As you know, Ronald Reagan was the leader of the party, and we had to challenge the redistricting of Jerry Brown in the primary election of the 1981 election. Ronald Reagan was the leader of the movement. The White House not only was the leader, but he had a spot on the radio that we had it on for about 3 or 4 months, and he participated. We had the Senate participating in it. We had the Assembly participating in it. We were united, and the only person that can do that is the California Republican Party. And I personally think that today we are a minority party, just like we were then. And in spite of being a minority party, we elected Republicans statewide, and we were able to deliberate when it was important.
Thanks, Rizzo. All right. The next topic in our Jeopardy lightning round is what do we do to have and create better candidates? What can we do in terms of creating a bench and fielding better candidates? Ron, you want to start?
Thanks, Mike. I think the absolute best place to train Republican candidates to run for state office is in local government. When I became party leader in San Diego, one of the first things we did is we disposed of the quaint notion of the so-called nonpartisan election. There's no such thing as a nonpartisan election. Every elected office, whether it's city council, school board, water board, fire board, mosquito abatement district, you name it, every local government office in the state is an opportunity to put Republican ideas into action. And speaking as someone who was a school board member, if you go to any school board meeting, first you see organized labor there, sitting there in the front row, keeping an eye on, and Lexi knows this from her school board tenure as well, in terms of watching what's taking place there, being very involved. And if we're not involved in local government elections, who is going to be involved? Who's going to be the dominant political force? If it's not us, it's going to be organized labor. And so when we elect Republicans to those mayor's offices and those city councils and other offices, they get valuable experience. They become better candidates. They're better prepared to move forward. When we took a look at the people who had successfully been elected to state office in San Diego, the odds were that the most successful candidates were people who had previously been elected to local government office. They built a base, they're political entrepreneurs, they become the head of their own political enterprise. It gives them the resources they need to go forward. It's also a great vetting process. If you come out of the private sector and you try to pole vault to a top elected office without having run for anything before, you don't go through the same type of vetting. It means that everything in your background becomes a revelation. But when you've been elected to lower office before, things that occurred before, prior to your election become old news. It's why the news media didn't give as much attention to what Jerry Brown said that was silly 30 years ago, but would give an incredible amount of scrutiny to every decision that Meg Whitman had made in the private sector, because it was her first run for office, whereas with Jerry Brown, that had all been reported on in the past.
Thanks. Minute 58, I don't know how he does that. Terso?
Let me see if I can do it.
All right, all right.
I think the most important thing is the most important thing is that the state party has to have a candidate selection committee, which is responsible, together with the county organizations, in selecting candidates for the Assembly, for the Senate, statewide, and Congress. This committee should have representation of the Assembly, the Senate, and the Congress. And they should participate, and they should, at all times, be part of the decision-making process. I also suggest that a representative of the business community be part of that. This will create a unity that is very important. I think that we have to be more selective in our candidates. There's a lot of people that think that they can be running for Congress, they can be running for the Assembly and the Senate, and they have very little experience, like Ron said. I have a lot of people that come to me seeking my endorsement very early in the campaigns, and the first thing I ask them, what is your relationship with the state party? Well, what is that, and what do they do? They don't even know what is the role of the state party. I think it's very important to select men and women to run for office that not only have the intellectual ability to do so, but they also have certain amount of capability to raise funds. Particularly among the minorities, they believe that the state party role is to roll them to their campaign, and that we, in effect, finance their campaign. In my estimation, there's a lot of people who mean very well, but they don't have the means to be able to get elected. Particularly, again, I express to you in the minority community. I just believe that we cannot have the Assembly running a candidate or favoring a candidate, and the state party a different one, and the county a different one. Again, the leadership of the state party is very important, this. And you have to have a selection committee that would work together with the county candidate selection committee and come together at the end of the day endorsing or helping, aiding and abetting that candidate once it wins the primary. This unity is absolutely necessary. In doing so, we can get candidates that philosophically agree with us. Many a times we have candidates that do not agree with the platform of the party, and their goals are totally different than what a party is.
Thanks, Terso. I agree with everything that's been said, and I would just add a couple of things. There is most of everything that's going to occur in terms of creating candidates is going to happen on the level that we all live on, which is at the county level, on the volunteer level. That is where, and I completely agree with the comment that Ron Nearing made, which is there are no nonpartisan races. Every county in this state and every county in the nation should have a strong endorsement committee process where everything from water board on up is looked at and those candidates are vetted. And all the Republicans should know if a Democrat's running that that person is a Democrat and what their views are and how they don't sort with us. And if possible, your county should have a slate card that goes out to every elected Republican. They do it very effectively in San Francisco to us, so in counties where we can do it to them, we should. That is where our candidates come from. They come from the water boards and the city councils and the county supervisors and that sort of thing. The second thing is, in California, we've completely shot ourselves in the foot by passing rules that prohibit the state party. We have a new Prop 14, which is made essentially made races for Assembly, State Senate, and Congress nonpartisan, where the top two run in the general. Whether they're it could be two Democrats, could be two Republicans. We don't get to have a nominee anymore. And this was passed by moderates because they were tired of losing. Primaries to us straight up, and so this was their answer to it. We then compounded the damage to ourselves by passing rules over Ron Nearing's objections. He had a plan where the party would have had the ability to speak and said, well, this person's the conservative that espouses conservative views. That is what, and instead a plan passed that doesn't allow the Republican Party, and the Republicans, we did this to ourselves, cannot express an opinion as to who we think the true Republican is in a race anymore. That's something that needs to be reversed. We're going to close with one more question, and then we're going to go to the media panel.
You might have to do the 1 minute answers, though, because
okay.
we're running over
All right,
time.
then we're going to do three 1 minute answers, and we're done. The final thing is national relevance, and I'm going to hold everyone to a minute and then cut them off. What can the California do to gain national relevance in terms of it participating in the presidential process and in national politics? Ron?
Well, I'm very disappointed with our Republican legislators who voted, along with the Democrats, to move our presidential primary back from February to June. It was a horrible mistake. It takes California out of relevance in the 2012 nominating process by most scenarios, unless we go all the way to the convention in terms of this nomination fight. This state will vote 7 months after, up to 7 months after the New Hampshire primary. This nominating contest will be over months before we ever get to California. All of our candidates will continue coming to California, but they'll be coming here to raise money, not to earn the support of volunteers and activists and so on. So that's a horrible, horrible dynamic that we've set up. Our presidential primary should be earlier, and we should be part of that nominating process. We completely took ourselves out of the game in 2012, and Republicans voted along with the Democrats to pass that.
Terso?
I must agree that unless the rules of the game are changed, there is no way there's going to be any relevance of us influencing in any way or form the selection or nomination of our party, except at the National Republican Convention. Nevertheless, you all know that in the old days, the Republican National Convention many a time selected our candidates because there were many a times 2 and 3, and I'm talking to you people 50 years ago. We had that very relevant during the 1968 convention, in which you had Rockefeller, you had Nixon, and Ronald Reagan running for the President of the United States. But other than that, I don't remember any a Republican National Convention having the opportunity to select them. So therefore, we have to change the rules of the game, like Ron says.
I agree with that. And one thought I'd throw is on the outside remote possibility that California still is in play come June of this year, that the nomination hasn't been decided. Keep in mind that we've had new rules, but that the candidates really haven't understood or embraced them yet. And if you're involved in a campaign, make sure that your campaign understands this, which is that we have winner-take-all by congressional district. That was something that John Fleischman came up with, and it passed while I was chairman. But what it does say is the 3 delegates from each congressional thing are decided just in that congressional seat. So anybody that comes to California, if they mount a good campaign, can win delegates here. It's not like the old days where only the front runner need show up and everybody else didn't. There's really good reasons to contest votes in California, and if we only had an earlier primary, it would be a very, very interesting thing for us.